If you're thinking about moving to Mexico, there are things nobody tells you in the beginning. Things you only learn once you've actually lived here long term. Some of those things will surprise you in the best way, others will challenge you, and a few will change you in ways you never saw coming. That's exactly what happened to us. 6 years ago, my wife, our 3-year-old daughter, and I boarded a flight to Mexico full of excitement and optimism, certain that things would go according to our MexitPlans. But real life had a very different story waiting for us. Today, I'm sharing the biggest things that we never saw coming, the routines we learned to love, the expectations that didn't matter, and the frustrations that nobody warned us about, and the moments that ended up meaning the most. Because if you're planning your own move to Mexico, or you're in that vacation fantasy phase right now, this will give you a much more honest picture of what life in Mexico really becomes over time. Let's get it. Year one was unforgettable. We arrived just before the pandemic and got to experience Mérida in all of its fall glory. Free concerts in the plazas, Dia de los Muertos celebrations, and Noche Blanca. The whole vibe that pulls people in and makes them fall in love with the city of Mérida. We spent our first few months in Centro and Colonial Santiago like most newcomers, and we learned real fast that the Centro sidewalks and strollers do not get along. Most days meant carrying little mama on our backs anytime we went anywhere on foot. Thankfully, we had already planned to move to the north after the first 30 days. We found a daycare in Benito Juarez called Tiny Tots, just minutes from our second home. Now, when we moved to the northern part of the city, what we would later learn is the golden zone. We decided that we didn't want to drive. So we purchased 2 hybrid bikes from the Decathlon, which is the sports store here. Those bikes would become our very first form of transportation here in Mérida, and we lived on those bikes. School drop-offs, pickups, coffee runs, errands to city center, we pedaled everywhere. And honestly, it was the best way to learn the streets of Montes de Ames, San Ramon Norte, and the neighborhoods of Benito Juarez. We met one of our closest friends, Ernesto, on our bikes, just riding by the Cuban Casina Economica that he worked at in Montes Ames one day. If you're curious about the neighborhoods of Mérida, check out the neighborhood walking tour series of videos that I've been doing. They'll give you a feel for what everyday life looks like here in Mexico. Now, we celebrated our first Christmas in Mérida at the greenhouse with all of our kids and family coming down. That holiday felt like the perfect start to this new chapter of life. And then just a few weeks later, one of the biggest turning points happened for us. We sold our franchise. I tried to sell it before moving from Atlanta to Mexico, but it just didn't happen. Looking back now, I know that God's timing is perfect. The sale went through in February 2020, literally days before the global pandemic would change everything. That same February, we found our very first long-term lease in the Villas La Hacienda neighborhood. Still one of my favorite neighborhoods to this day. We'd already purchased some furniture from a friend, and we stored it here in Mérida at a local storage place. What we didn't realize is how hard it is to get furniture here and how different the size and quality are compared to the United States. Furniture here is not designed for binge watching Netflix, and your body will tell you real quick it's time to get up. This sofa that I'm sitting on right now, the story couch, is actually one of those pieces of furniture that we purchased way back then. Getting an unfurnished home let us set up a full second household here in Mexico while still keeping our home in the States. One thing that surprises us is that the storage facilities here are much more expensive than in the United States. At that time, 2019, late 2019, 2020, I don't believe they had climatized storage units, and they probably still don't because that would require a lot of electricity, and electricity here is definitely not cheap. So fast forward to March 2020 and everything changed for everybody. Our daughter in college had to come home after her first semester because of the pandemic. Thankfully, we still had our big house in Georgia with a theater room, a huge backyard, my Zen garden and pond, with plenty of space for us all to be together while the world tried to figure things out. So that first year, we were in a really unique situation. We still had a house in Georgia and a house in Mérida. Now, we returned to Mérida in June of 2020. Georgia was one of those red states denying the seriousness of the pandemic, and honestly, I felt much safer here in Mexico. The governor here in Yucatan at the time handled the situation better than most folks around the world. He showed real leadership. When we came back to Mérida in June of 2020, one of the significant changes that we made from before was buying a car, which was a huge game changer. We didn't miss driving around during those first 6 months, but with the pandemic rules in place, having our own car made life easier. We sold our cars in the States to CarMax and bought semi-new cars here, which I recommend you do if your cars are paid off. It was during the pandemic that this channel, MexitPlans, was born. That's when I met many of you for the very first time. If you've been here since the beginning, drop day one crew in the comments below. So once we got settled in, one really important thing as a part of our plan was starting the search for a live-in nanny for Ashlyn. Finding a good nanera is not easy, and we've made other videos about that. I'll leave links to the videos about some of the struggles we had with that process in the description notes below. We went through several different people for different reasons before we met Shirley, and meeting her changed everything. Shirley was a first-year college student from a small town near Mérida, and her schedule lined up perfectly with Ashlyn's schedule. Shirley has a heart as big as Mexico and played a huge role in helping our daughter Ashlyn become fluent in Spanish. She became our adopted daughter and will always have a big space in our heart. Fast forward to year 2, we all survived the pandemic. Mérida stayed locked down long after the US started opening up. Here in Mérida, you had to sanitize your hands and your feet before walking into any shopping center or even any store. Masks were absolutely required. No one complained because everyone wanted to protect their families. It was really something to experience. Something that really surprised us was how many people we had visit us from the States during COVID. Mexico was one of the few places you could travel to. And one of the nice things about the healthcare system here is that COVID testing was super easy at home or in testing centers, so visits were always safe. And it was really great having family come to spend time with us. Our social life during that time was pretty tight but meaningful. We built a small circle that became our family. Our Mérida tribe is connected with our Atlanta tribe, and the friends we made here have traveled to Atlanta and met our family there, and vice versa. In those first couple of years, we spent most of our time free traveling around Mexico, exploring and hanging out together. That was the vacation phase of our life. And yes, we lived here, but we were still experiencing Mexico more than the normal living routine. One of the tips I'll give you is to get out of your comfort zone and go to meetups or regular events in the city when you first arrive. It's easier now than ever as the community has grown 10x since we've moved here. The people that we met really in the first 6 months and some within the first week of moving here are still our closest friends and family to this day. I think most people move here to decompress from the social stress of the US and then eventually hit their stride with everyday life. And that's what year 2 really looked like for us. Another big milestone that year was going back to sell our house in Georgia. Our daughter moved into an on-campus apartment for her second year in college, which gave us the room to focus on getting the house sold. It was stressful. We went back in the spring hoping to close by Memorial Day, and it didn't exactly close by Memorial Day, but once we found the right agent, we got the house sold at the top of the market. Now let me be real, getting rid of your stuff is the hardest part of relocating. Not the visas, not the language barrier, not the culture shock, the stuff. And if you're in that stage, start right now. Get rid of anything that you don't use weekly. Don't buy anything new, and take pictures of all your sentimental items. Donate clothes if you can. Have a yard sale to get rid of your big items like furniture, but be prepared to get pennies on the dollar. The emotional and physical part of detaching from your belongings sneaks up fast. Selling our home in Georgia was a little bittersweet. We love that house and it served our family well. But letting it go was necessary for us to move on to the next chapter. Once the house was sold, we needed more space here in Mexico, and we especially wanted Shirley to have a dedicated space in the new house. So we moved into our third home, which was a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom main house with a casita, which was basically a full apartment. And at that house in San Ramon Norte is where our real Mexico life really began. The vacation phase kind of ended and our everyday life set in. Real life meant we were both working consistently, my wife teaching Spanish and English, and me offering cybersecurity consulting and courses on moving to Mexico. We turned the casita into a video studio and later a classroom for my wife's students. That house matched our needs perfectly for the season of life that we were in. We ended up living in the San Ramon Norte house for 4 years. So now 6 years in, we're in a new house. And I had a lot of time to think about what has surprised me most about living in Mexico long term. First thing that surprised me here in Mexico is my wife turned out to be the ultimate athlete. In the 31 years of marriage, she has never been big into athletics. In fact, the most athletic thing we've done prior to moving here was bowling. That was probably the most athletic thing we had done. And then out of nowhere, she flipped it into beast mode. I think it was our 3rd year here when she decided that she would do an Ironman, not just a regular triathlete, the Ironman. And she went from doing none of the 3 sports, no swimming, no running, no cycling, to crushing the Ironman 70.3 in 8 hours with a smile on her face. It was amazing. It was one of the most inspirational things I've ever seen. Since then, she's done an Oceanman. She's completed all 3 of the Spartan race distances for the trifecta. My wife is not only an Ironman, but a Spartan trifecta as well. She's amazing. And she's forced me to step up my game to stay healthy enough to be here for a while. So I didn't, and I never would have predicted that exercise has become a major part of our lives here in Mexico. That's the first thing that surprised me. Now, if I would have told myself 6 years ago where I would be in Spanish, I wouldn't have believed it. 6 years in, and I still don't speak Spanish like a native, but I do feel like I am fluent. Let me explain. I can hold conversations. I talk to contractors and neighbors all the time, but I still sound like someone who speaks Spanish as a second language. After about 2.5 years, I felt like when I could communicate, that was good enough. And so I stopped taking formal Spanish classes for a while, for about 1.5 years. And honestly, fluency requires consistency, and I took my foot off the gas too soon. So I really wish I would have kept going with Spanish lessons all the way through, and I think I would be right up there with, saying anything that I want to at the moment that it comes to my mind. Now I have to think about it, but I can have full conversations on the phone. I can express all my thoughts, and I can get down to the little details. So it's a work in progress, but you have to be consistent and stay with it. My daughter is actually the most fluent of the 3 of us, and my wife is fluent. I'm fluent, but my daughter is natively fluent, and she sounds like a Yucateco. So she is very, very fluent in Spanish. The third thing that surprised me the most is when I started the channel back in August of 2020, the goal was to show other families that they didn't have to wait to retirement to live the dream of moving to Mexico. Fast forward to today, 2025, and the number of families, especially Black American immigrant families, has more than 10x. So when we first moved here, there were probably 20 families or so that we knew or that we would see around. Now there are hundreds of immigrant families that live here in Mérida, Mexico. And I would argue that Mérida has the largest community of Black American immigrants living full-time in Mexico. There are multiple families that attend our school now. There are locticians in town, there are barbers in town, and there are other stylists who specialize in Black hair. One year we even had a family reunion within our community. It was pretty special. I've been to several events where there have been well over 100 people, and it's honestly beautiful to see. Talking about one of the ways that I've been changed for the better, Mexico has changed my diet. One of the things I never ate back home was avocados. I didn't like the color or the consistency. But here, I love avocados. I love guacamole, believe it or not. When all the ingredients are fresh, it's simply amazing. The other thing that I like that I never liked before was spices. I actually like habanero on my egg. I still hate cilantro, but you know what? I can actually deal with it now, especially if it's cooked. And I love Mexican beers. Bohemia Obscura, Sol, and Indio are my top 3 that I like. I often eat more fruit here because it's always available. Just today I had a fruit bowl of bananas, blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries. The other thing that I've done is I put lime on everything because it makes everything better. And I don't know how I didn't know about the spice tajin and the dish of chilaquiles before moving to Mexico. If you haven't tried either of those, you're simply missing out. Now, another way that Mexico has changed me is I'm not affected by the mosquitoes as much in year 6 as I was in year 1. I don't know if my diet changed my body chemistry, but mosquitoes don't bother me nearly as much as they did when I first moved here. And the heat, I've actually become acclimated to the heat. To me, 70 degrees Fahrenheit feels cool or actually cold. I'll wear pants when it's 70 degrees, but I might actually take a jacket out if it's going to be below 70 at night. One of the hobbies I have back home that I absolutely love is golf. And the thing that I miss most is mostly my golf buddies. I miss my golf brothers, but I miss playing golf. And here in Mexico, golf is crazy expensive, particularly in the state of Yucatan. A private course on its best day, which is about a 6.5 out of 10, can cost over $200 US for one round. Now, you can drive to Cancun or to Campeche, the neighboring states, and play and get better courses, but the price is still about the same. So here, golf is a hobby for the absolute wealthy if you want to play regularly. Now, I may get a little heat for this one, and it might be a little controversial, but it's absolutely true. People here cannot drive. People drive distracted. They're always on their phones, looking at their phones. The second it rains, it's like driving in ice or snow. There's accidents everywhere. Here's my personal proof. We've been in 4 accidents in 6 years. Compare that to my previous 29 years of driving, where I had 0 accidents in the States. So if you plan to drive here, I definitely recommend dash cameras and to drive at your own risk. It's probably one of the most riskiest things you can do here in Mérida is drive. Now, after 6 years of living here, one of the things that I'm surprised about is how little I actually want to go back to the United States. Once a year at most, and for no more than 7 days is plenty for me. I love Atlanta, but Atlanta honestly doesn't feel like Atlanta anymore. It feels like someplace else. And it definitely doesn't feel like home. This is home for me. I miss my family, I miss my friends, of course I miss golf and Southern food, but a 1-week visit checks all of those boxes. Now, I have no real way of quantifying this one, but here time seems to fly faster. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because it's light around 5:30 every day and it's dark after 6 o'clock. So around 6 p.m. it gets dark. And maybe it's the fact that I don't really go out much after dark, but the days seem to go by really fast here. In 6 years, you know, the time frame of 6 years of being here really feels like it's been 2 years. If you watch any of the previous anniversary videos, you know one of the things that I've always been looking for is a church community, a community of believers. I tried a couple of the churches here that are bilingual, and I've often used my Spanish as an excuse that I didn't speak well enough, but now that I speak well enough and understand and can hear Spanish, that's really not an excuse anymore. But recently I started a Bible study at my home with 10 married fathers. And it's been a huge blessing to all of our families. Finding the guys that I fellowship with probably took the longest out of everything in our MexitPlans. But I believe in God's perfect timing. So I'm grateful that we're here right now. Now, a big part of this video is I wanted to know what you wanted to know about life here after 6 years. One of the questions that we got from a lot of different people is, do I feel embraced by the community? I will answer that by saying yes, especially in our new house. In our previous home, we lived behind a huge wall. It was like a 12-foot wall. So we only knew our immediate next door neighbor and the neighbor across the street. Here we're in a gated street and we see our neighbors every time we open the front door. Our front gate is an iron gate that you can see through. So as soon as we open the door, in fact, I can see all the way to the street right now as I'm recording this video. But as soon as we open the door, we see people, right? Either walking up the street or we see our neighbor directly across from us because they're not behind a wall either. The cool thing is I've met the neighbor immediately across the street. We've exchanged numbers and we've talked several times. And I've met the neighbor next door before we moved in. He and I have talked a couple of times. There's also a corner store about 20 feet away from this house. And they definitely know that I live on the street because, you know, I regularly walk over there and buy eggs or whatever. I don't yet feel like an old school regular at the corner store. Everyone speaks and everyone has been completely kind. So 0 complaints, but you know, I feel like I'm a part of the community, but I don't know that people know us yet in the community. The other question that I got was, how is it moving with a child? And I got to tell you, it's been nothing short of beautiful to watch our child grow up fully bilingual and bicultural. Mérida, Mexico is one of the best places, I think, right now to raise a child. Kids play in the parks, there's community, it's family oriented. It is an incredible place. And I feel she's more Mexican than American in terms of how she views the world. And I love that for her. One of the questions I got is, do we ever get lonely? And I can tell you that early on, it did get a little lonely. And really for me, that was just for male energy. And for a long time, I was surrounded by a lot of women at social events. I even made a video many years ago.
One of the things that often comes up when we're at Sunday dinner and just talking to other Black expats is, you know, why aren't there more brothers traveling and making this journey and transition alone or with their families? And, you know, really the brothers that have made the journey, I think I've counted 6 or 11 with families. Most of them are married Black men with, you know, with kids. That's in definitely stark contrast to over the last year, I've met over 16 single Black women who are traveling and been traveling for years.
And I called for the brothers to show up, and man, did they show up. So now I have way more opportunities to do things than I ever did before. And I literally have to pick and choose what I want to do so I don't get burned out going 7 days a week. Years 1 and 2, we were doing nonstop events. Now it's a little bit more chill. So loneliness, not so much anymore. We definitely have a crew. We definitely have community, and there's always something happening here. Another good question that I got was, is there reverse culture shock? And I got to tell you, absolutely. And I will say for me, it's more sticker shock. When we left, I believe a Waffle House meal was like $8.25 for a, you know, all American, right? It was pretty cheap. You got a waffle, you got eggs, you got bacon, and toast if you want it for $8.25. And now I believe that's more like $12.50. So definitely culture shock. Everything we buy, I'm like, this is crazy. This is insane. We're spending, you know, $50 at Chick-fil-A. Like, it doesn't make sense, right, for fast food. So we can get a very good quality cooked meal with fresh ingredients here for that same price. So it's you know, kind of crazy. But yeah, there's definitely sticker shock more so than cultural shock. On the cultural perspective, I think there's just a general lack of respect in the United States. Here, respect is kind of baked into the culture. It's even in the language. It's very, very common where you hear usted and ustedes here in the language. It's baked into the language. Mexico also has its social and cultural issues like everywhere, but generally, people typically respect each other. And that's one of the things that I notice immediately when I go back home is just, you know, people are loud talking, people are cursing. There's just lots of things that are disrespectful as a whole, as a culture, that I find when I go back to the States. Another really good question is, what's the biggest cultural hurdle that you faced? And I gotta tell you, it's the respect of time. Being on time here means being 15 to 30 minutes late. So with no explanation, no apology, is just absolutely normal. It makes planning your day pretty difficult, especially if you're waiting for a plumber or somebody to show up to do some work. You know, they'll often say, yeah, I'll be there in the morning. Okay, what time in the morning? What hour? Oh, I'll be there at 9. And that means really 9:30, right? Even when you're invited to a party, if they tell you the party starts at 6, if you show up at 6:30, you're probably still going to be the first one there. So just know that being on time is really not a thing here in Mexico. And that's been the hardest thing to just kind of adjust to. So there's another question about, what is my strategy for dealing with the winter traffic? So we get a huge influx of snowbirds that don't live here year round, but they come back from like October to March every single year. And I'm from Atlanta, so the traffic here, while it can be bad at times, it just doesn't compare to Atlanta traffic. Atlanta traffic is bad all the time for the most part, unless you know how to get around. But I still have a plan for how to get around here. So what I do is I avoid school areas. Anywhere where there's a large school, I avoid them between the hours of 1:30 and 2:30 p.m. because every parent has to pick up their kids, and there's always going to be a line. It's always going to impact the traffic on the surrounding street. I also try to avoid the roundabout near La Isla Mall, or going to La Isla Mall, the Temazon Norte roundabout at City Center. So unless you're going early in the morning or late at night, you know, that you're just going to be in traffic going north to Temazon Norte in that whole area. Now, if it's raining, I stay home because unless I absolutely have to go somewhere, I know for a fact that traffic is going to be bad around town everywhere just because of the way folks drive. There's going to be accidents that you have to navigate around. There's going to be water in the streets, maybe even flooding, and there's going to be potholes that you can't see because they're covered in water. So it's best if it's raining, just call it the day and stay home if you can. I definitely want to know what part of our 6-year journey surprised you the most. Tell me in the comments below, and I love hearing your stories as well. If you want to catch up on the whole journey year by year, check out this playlist over here. And until next time, MexitPlans Monty, I'm out.